Hello, I'm Gavin Yule. I'm an actor with Lungha Theatre Company, and today I'm here with
Judith Doherty. I'm the co-artistic director and chief executive of Gridiron.
And today we're in the Barony bar in Bruton in Edinburgh. So Jude, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us today. I would like to start off by asking you, just very easily, how did you become involved with Gridiron in the first place?
Well, so I've been involved with Gridiron since its very start. I actually set up the company straight out of university, actually. I went to University of Edinburgh. And when I was there, I got roped into the University Theatre Company. Never on stage, never as an actor, which is for the good of mankind, because I'm no good at that. But I was a producer there and I ran the building as a fringe venue manager. And when I was there, I encountered an actor-director called Ben Harrison, who was a year above me at uni. We fought like cat and dog during our time at university. And then in 1994, I was running the building for the Fringe, and Ben was directing a show called Heron Burke, which took place half in the Bedlam and half across in Greyfriars Kirkyard, which is one of the first site-specific things that had happened at the Fringe. So that happened and opened, and it went really well. And I woke up one morning during the festival and went, oh God, I think I need to set up a theatre company, and I think I have to work with Ben Harrison. And here we are. That was 1994, as I say, and here we are 24 years later.
Wow, fantastic, yeah. Absolutely fantastic. You say you've been involved with Gridiron since it started. Where did the name Gridiron actually come from?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. Not least because I'm Northern Irish, so a lot of people don't, when I say gridiron, I have to really try and not make it sound like gridiron.
Yeah.
So when it was for about a year before we actually set up the company officially, I had a book and I wrote down all sorts of different ideas for the company name. And then I would check them out with Companies House, and more often than not, the names would already be gone or there'd be some other company with them. And Gridiron was something that was always sitting in the back of my head, and I had no idea why. Because ostensibly, on the face of it, it doesn't really have anything to do with theatre. I had been looking for a name that would sound quite strong, quite sort of metallic, quite sort of industrial, and that wouldn't necessarily have a sort of gender sort of direction. So Gridiron was there in the background with all sorts of other things like theatre, arc, like arc well done. But I couldn't find any reason why I should use Gridiron. And then I was at home and I looked at this really old dictionary that my dad had, and Gridiron was in there. And a number of different explanations of it, but one of them was that the gridiron is actually the thing that a lighting rig goes into in a theatre. So there I had my reason. But gridiron is normally written as one word, but we split it up into two words, because if you put it on a poster, it looks like Gridiron. So we're like, this is going to look better. But of course, the main thing that people know Gridiron for is American football.
Yeah.
So if you try and look us up on Google, you'll get this whole raft of American football stuff along with hopefully us not too far down the list.
Oh, fantastic! So you've produced a lot of promenade productions over the years, but your very first production, Clearance, which was produced at the Traverse in 1996, wasn't a promenade production. Why? What eventually made yourself and Ben Harrison decide to specialise in promenade theatre after Clearance? Well,
it's interesting. You've done your research. A very important point of that is that Ben didn't actually direct that first production, because he, as I was saying, he was the year above me at university. So as I was gently setting up the company, I finished my degree, but Ben went off and did some training. Specifically, he did his training to be a director. So he went to Central in London to do that. So I got someone else to help me at the start of the company, and she directed the first production. And the script for Clearance was written by a girl that we'd went to university with, who now does some writing for EastEnders and different things. And it could have been a site-specific piece because it was set on the lawn of a country house in the Borders. But Katrina, who directed the first one, wasn't as interested in site work as Ben and I were. So it was just about getting the company up and running, and also it was really helpful and very exciting to be in the Traverse with our first show. And I think they didn't actually realise that it was our first show. I think we kind of slipped in under the net.
Yeah.
So.
When you eventually did produce your first promenade production, first in 1997 at the Fringe and then again in 98 in Mary King's Close, because promenade theatre was quite new in Scotland at the time, how did the audience respond to the fact that they were literally walking into a show rather than sitting and watching it?
Well, I mean, they had a fantastic reaction, and I mean, I have to be honest, we really didn't know what we were doing, really. None of us. So it really was working out and using our common sense as to how we were going to make it happen. And the lessons that we learnt on those first two shows, we carry still with us through the shows that we've worked on together. And because really it is just constantly thinking about what the audience experience is going to be, as well as the experience for the actors and the crew and where everyone needs to be. But there was a huge, for the Bloody Chamber in particular, the first show, because it was in Mary King's Close, which now of course is a big tourist attraction, but at the time there were a few walking tours that would go into it. Okay. But really a lot of people hadn't been in there, and it really was just bricks and mortar. So the sense that we've played on again and again with our shows of taking an audience into a space that they wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to get into just creates a real extra sense of excitement. And then it then became about making sure that everybody was safe and that we could get everyone out, and that it wasn't too scary. But I think that sense of excitement very probably covered a lot of the things that we didn't know to do well in those first couple of shows, because we were just learning our way. Yeah.
Did anything go particularly wrong with that show? Because obviously Mary King's Close is haunted. What was it like working in a space like that where there's some sort of paranormal activity? Was there anything kind of that went wrong during the shows or during the tech or anything? Or?
Do there absolutely was. And I mean, I had been a kind of non-believer. I'm a bit superstitious, but I did think I saw a ghost once in the Bedlam Theatre as well, but in the daytime, and it scared the life out of me. But still, I was fully prepared as the producer of the show in Mary King's Close to make up stories to get press if I needed to, but I really didn't need to. So there were a couple of things that happened that I think were inexplicable, unexplainable. And one is we had to do our get-ins and get the building ready overnight. We had to be in there really quite late at night before the show happened, because there were these walking tours that would go in. So that obviously heightened our sense of fear anyway. But so there was one night we had just loaded at the start of our time, we'd loaded all the equipment in, which we'd begged, borrowed and stolen from anywhere that we could get it. And we'd left piles and piles of cables and flight cases closed in a room that the tours didn't go into, and there was nothing, it was just a dark room, no lights, no electricity, nothing. So we finished work probably about 4 a.m, and when we got back in at 10:30 the next night, the flight cases were open and the cables were just thrown all over the room.
Oh heavens.
Now, there shouldn't have been anyone in that room. Nobody should have been able to tell there was anything in that room, and why would you do that? So we were all a bit like, huh? And then, and this is even weirder, so the show was up and running, sold out, it was great. We got Herald Angel, it was lovely, so there were audiences coming. Stephen Burkoff came to see the show.
Fantastic.
And then left, but never mind, that's another story. So the Bloody Chamber, if you know the story, is the story of the Bluebeard fairy tale. So it's a man who has married lots of women who have died in mysterious circumstances, and this is the story of his last, much younger bride in a sort of feminist retelling by Angela Carter. And we discover through the course of, he tells her she's not allowed to go into, she can go into any room in this massive mansion that he lives in, apart from the room that one key opens. So a main prop in the show is a huge big bunch of keys. Of course, like all of us, she's nosy and inquisitive. He goes away on business. She goes to immediately to that room, unlocks the door, and in there she finds the bodies of all his previous brides displayed in the way in which he's killed them.
Yeah.
So we had what do you call those things? So anyway, we did dead bodies, and we had catafalques and all sorts of Iron Maidens, you know that thing.
Yeah.
So we had one of those and all sorts of stuff. So big set of keys, there's about 40 keys on this ring. They make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
The promenade for the Bloody Chamber kind of went like that around a number of different rooms in Mary King's Close.
Yeah.
So we brought the audience in over a roof to the bottom of Mary King's Close. Scenes in a room, up a corridor, past where the ghost of the little girl is in Mary King's Close, which is a famous one, into this room, and then back like that. Mm-hmm. And but actually no, back out like that, and then back like that. Mm. So I'm at the front of the audience, and Deborah, my sister, who was with Gridiron, is at the back. And the scene happens. There's a bed here and a chair here, and the guy playing Bluebeard puts the keys down on the chair and leaves the room, and the audience leave the room. Mm-hmm. And Deborah's coming out at the heels of the audience, and she sees that the keys are on the bed.
Seriously?
And there's no way that could have happened without you hearing the keys.
Yeah.
It makes me a wee bit tingly, because I swear to God, there's no way. And we were constantly watching the audience because we needed no one to pick up the keys, to play a joke on us, to hide them.
Yeah.
And they were on the bed, because Deborah it was my brother-in-law, God rest him, was doing stage management for us, and it was his responsibility to get the keys to the next place that they needed to be. So she was busy trying to tell him, he was coming in on the heels of the audience, and she was busy trying to tell him the keys aren't there, but don't worry, they're there. But also going, how did they get there? So it's quite scary.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry, a bit long.
No, don't worry. But again, having been involved with Gridiron since the very beginning, I'm going to pick your brains a little bit here. Okay. Do you have any particular projects that you really loved to work on? See,
yes, I thought you'd probably ask me that. Of course, the first thing I would say is the 2 shows that we did with Lungha Theatre Company. And actually, all joking aside, they are amongst my favourite for all sorts of different reasons, not least, the locations that we did them in. It's kind of hard because it's like trying to ask me to pick between my children. Mm-hmm. There are definitely some shows that we did that were more difficult and more emotionally difficult to make happen because of all sorts of things that went along with them, or things that were happening in our real lives at the same time.
Yeah.
But there are none that I'd say I wish we hadn't done. Well, there's maybe one. Anyway, but it wasn't either of not very recent. I think each of the different. We've had brilliant opportunities to work in some really unusual places, like doing a show at night in Debenham's department store was great and quite scary. We've done a lot of work in the Middle East, which was really interesting. The show we made in 2006, Rome at the airport, has to be up there because it just was quite impossible. The fact that we managed to make that happen, and a lot of that was to do with the fact that it was with National Theatre Scotland, was incredible, and it took the government to change the law to allow us to take our audience from landside to airside without going through security, which just wouldn't happen in the world that we live in today. But recently, I think our show, Dr. Stirlingshire's Discovery at the Zoo, has to rate highly, because how often when you make a show will you be standing with your audience and they can hear a lion roar?
Yeah.
That does something for all of us. So.
And again, for me as an actor, there would be some nights, for anybody who doesn't know, that was my first show with Lungha. But for me as an actor, going through the scene and then suddenly just hearing a lion roar in the background, that for me made my scenes a little bit more atmospheric, almost, because for me, I mean, obviously, I believe the world that I create, because that's what you do when you're an actor, but I think when your audience is literally face to face with the actors, they believe it as well. So it was really, really, so for a first show, that was really, really quite an experience.
Well, no, absolutely. And you had quite a challenge actually, because we were having to kind of gently walk past you.
Yes.
What was your animal that was supposed to be in
the wildcat.
The wildcat, and the wildcat had been moved.
Yeah.
So really for a first outing, that was quite a something.
Oh, I know, it was a massive responsibility as well.
And you did it beautifully.
Thank you very much.
As did everyone. But I think really, I mean, you really picked up on it there. I mean, theatre is a very collaborative medium, and that the most important collaboration really is between actors and audience. So when you have an audience member who's standing next to you,
yeah,
or walking past you, or maybe walking behind you, it really it's 360 degrees, and we can touch each other, and we try to create a sense of we're all in this together. Good luck, we'll get to the end. It's all good, but it does take a very particular kind of performer to be able to do that. Not everybody likes to do that.
Yeah.
And with a lot of Gridiron shows, we'll actually cast the audience. So sometimes the actors will use so in that very first show, The Bloody Chamber, at times we made the audience be like bookcases, and we made them be, or for the show at the airport, they were all travellers. And that's not for every audience member either.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to choose your shows wisely.
Yeah. Has there ever been any, just going back to what you've just said there, when you've cast an audience, do you kind of pre-warn the audience, if you go beyond this point, you will kind of be cast? And is there ever anybody that has come to a Gridiron show and you've asked them, would you be up for doing this, and they've just said no, not doing it?
Yes, and those early shows, The Bloody Chamber and Gargantua, the first two Fringe shows that we did in '97 and '98, they were challenging for an audience because, as you said, there wasn't a lot of promenade, site-specific stuff happening in Britain at the time. Also, they effectively felt like they were underground. So we had to be careful of people that maybe were claustrophobic. And in actual fact, one thing I deeply regret is someone came from Channel 4 to Gargantua, one of the big commissioning editors, but he got in touch beforehand and said, but I'm claustrophobic. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to manage to see the show.
Yeah.
So I took him into the building before the show happened, and he couldn't handle it. So we never saw the show. So you sort of go, oh my God, what opportunities could have arisen for the actors and for all of us from then? Never mind. But we learnt from then. I know that there are a lot of companies that do our kind of immersive work that really don't necessarily want the audience to feel that comfortable. And sometimes you make shows, we made a kind of a horror movie film, horror show called What Remains once, and you do want the audience to be a little more on edge. But our approach is that we actually, to allow the audience to feel on edge before they come to us, we want to give them as much comfort and reassurance as possible. So if we need to give people instruction or information before they get to the show, then we'll do extra sort of emails or extra bits of print to advise people, for coming to the zoo, what to wear, and you'll be walking around and, that kind of thing. Just because then we're giving everybody the best chance of enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
But we will try and design that so that the experience of coming to the production expands beyond just the hour and a half or whatever it is that they'll spend with us. But we don't really do a lot of audience interaction, but on occasion we have done something where we'll try and bring an audience member up. Yeah. And we did it in Dr. Stirlinger's Discovery, where we were asking some of the children, and some, you have to have a second, you have to have a plan B for if they go, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, that certainly keeps you on your toes, that kind of thing, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any spaces that the company haven't worked in yet that you can see the company doing any future projects in?
Ben once had an idea to do a show in an ice rink with all the cast skating. This was even before like dancing on ice.
Yeah.
Thank God we got over that, because I mean the insurance and the opportunity for injury would be
massive.
huge. I think one of the things we're facing, all companies that are interested in site-specific stuff are facing, is that with urban development and redevelopment, a lot of really exciting warehouse spaces and disused spaces are disappearing. And in cities outside of Edinburgh that aren't so used to a whole festival landing and everything becoming a performance space, it can be difficult to get permission to work in unusual spaces. But God, I'm going to have to think about that one, because I bet you there is somewhere I go, I'd love to do it there. Like the Moon, not really.
The Moon, I think that might be a bit difficult to
We looked into trying to do a show in an oil rig.
Oh, right.
Because we made a show a couple of years ago about oil called Crude, but we'd been working on it for about 10 years, and I did the budget for taking an audience to an oil rig. But of course, you have to get a helicopter to an oil rig.
Oh.
And you can only take 12 people at a time, and it costs something like 16 grand a trip. So I still did the budget, but strangely it didn't happen.
Yeah. Could you just talk us through what tends to happen when you're kind of trying to find a space to do a show?
I think that's the best part of my job, actually, because I've always been surprised with the willingness that people have had. And now we started in the 90s when the Troubles were really quite bad in Northern Ireland. And people were always just willing to let me go in and wander around spaces. At one point I had keys that gave me access to the city chambers in Edinburgh. Probably shouldn't say that. And this was in 1997, and I'm Northern Irish. Anyway, so what happens is that Ben, or the director that we're working with, will present the kind of idea for the show. And sometimes, and then we'll know at that point immediately whether or not it should be a site-specific show or a show that goes on stage, because we sometimes do that as well. And it's very important to not try and put a show in a space that it shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
Because that's when difficult things happen. So usually the kind of venue will present itself then. So then I head off and I walk around and I look at buildings. Back in the 90s, pre-internet, really, that was the way it went. You know, when I looked at signs and empty spaces, or, you know, if we wanted to make a show in, let me think, one of the early ones, parks, for instance, then I get in touch, you know, it's quite, you know, I get in touch with the council and see if they'd be gently up for it. But now it's big internet research to see what's around, speaking to lots of people, and then trying to get into spaces.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have been known, like if I've been on holiday and there's a really exciting space, I'll sort of try and get us in there to just have a wee neb by saying that I work for a theatre company and we might want to do a show. Sometimes it's worked. But don't often do that. And then you would want to go back and do the show. But a lot of people often ask what comes first, the site or the idea for the show. And we have done it both ways. But for me, creatively, it's a bit more straightforward and a bit more rewarding for me to have to look for a site to fit an idea, rather than to find an idea to fit a site. If that makes sense.
Oh, really interesting. When you've obviously found the space and you've started to work the show into that space, what in general are some of the challenges that the company tend to come across when producing promenade theatre?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that we've made happen are in, and some of our work isn't promenade. Sometimes we do a work on a site and the audience sit, and a lot of times that'll be because there isn't maybe room to move them around. But a lot of the spaces that we work in, like the zoo and like Debenhams and the airport, have a very, very definite, important primary purpose that we need to not interrupt. And that gives us the biggest challenge, but that's also one of the things that's great. For instance, we made a show here called Barflies that was about the creative effects of alcohol. It's probably the quickest way to say it, and it was based on the life of a poet, a famous American writer called Charles Bukowski. Yeah. But so the biggest challenge that we had doing the show here is that it's a pub, and it's open from 11 in the morning to 12 or 1 at night. And it had to be able to do that for the time that we would be doing the show. The landlord at the time here was very keen to have us do the show. So he agreed to let us do it during the Fringe, to let us do it at a sort of fallow period in the middle of the day, so that we didn't have to be asking people to come and see a show at 2 in the morning. So that was good. But we still had to, before and after the show happened, we had to move all the chairs and tables, get everything set out, turn the signs around and get everything ready, and then do that again afterwards. So very often we find, like when we did Dr. Stirlingshire's Discovery at the zoo, our final scene was in the Jungle Cafe. That had to be a cafe until, was it 3 o'clock we got in there?
3, yeah.
And our show started at 6.
Yeah.
So it had to be a cafe to 3, then they had to clear the cafe, then we had to move all the tables and chairs out of the way and put out the audience seating. And at the same time, we had to set up half the cafe for you all to have your first to have your dinner and then to have your dressing room.
Yeah.
And be ready for the show to start at 6. So quite often, a great benefit to me is that I lose quite a bit of weight when we're doing a show.
All right.
And then of course I put it all straight back on again later. But that's the main challenge.
Yeah. When you're working in a public space, you've kind of touched on it there, but when you're working in a space that's technically still open to the public, in general, how do the public respond to the fact that there's these technical people suddenly in the building and they're telling you, no, you can't go here because we're trying to set something up? How do they, are they quite accommodating to that?
God,
or are they quite?
That is an excellent question. And because you think, we're in Scotland, it's really cultured, and we're not trying to interrupt anything. The first thing that we do is that we try to not interrupt service. But obviously there are going to be times when there are certain areas,
of course,
that for safety beyond anything else, we can't let the public go into. But so I'll use the airport. The airport is the prime example for this. So the first scene of the airport took place at check-in. There were flights coming in and out, people having to check in when the show was happening, when we were doing our get-in. So the first thing we did was we all had high-vis on. We immediately looked like we worked in the airport anyway, and nobody could tell the difference between, Edinburgh Airport on your high-vis jacket and Gridiron Theatre Company. So the first thing we had to do was learn the answers to all of the questions that we would be asked. Where's the bank machine? Where's the toilet? Where's the quiet room? Where do I check in for my flight? We knew where people had to check in for flights, which was quite good because the last flight that went out went to Cork in Ireland, and mostly people were a wee bit tipsy.
Oh, right.
Coming to get onto that flight. But what was interesting is the airport were really accommodating, and a lot of the passengers going through were accommodating. At one point, my sister was flying over from Ireland, and the pilot announced from the cockpit that you'll see something strange in the airport today because we have a theatre company called Gridiron. She nearly passed out. It's the most exciting thing that ever happened. But a lot of people were really annoyed because why are they here? They shouldn't be here. This is an airport. Why are they doing that? We weren't interrupting them in any way, really. Yeah. But we were surprised by sometimes the anger that people had. Waste of money, theatre, bloody waste of money, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I tend to find that, just to draw on my experience slightly, through working with Gridiron on Dr. Stirlingshire, we used to rehearse the Penguin Parade every afternoon, and because it was obviously during the Easter break, there were school groups in the afternoon. And I tended to find, and I found this when I was doing the Wildcat scene as well, the amount of stares that I would get from random people. And I think it was partly because during the day, the enclosure I was doing the Wildcat scene at had a hippo in it. So I think the fact that I was, in a sense, talking about a wildcat, and obviously there's no wildcat there, everybody was looking at me going,
it's a hippo, that's not...
Yeah, exactly. And then again, when we were doing the Penguin Parade, because obviously they had these massive boom speakers, and then the music would come blasting out of these speakers. The kids what used to be quite funny was the kids would be coming down the road with the teacher and they'd be joining in and just kind of waddling along. So it's, it's just lovely when you see people, even although they're not technically sure what's going on, they just kind of go with it. They just join in.
Did anyone ever ask you if you were making a film?
Well, actually, no, not exactly. But we did because we rehearsed it every day before dinner. There was one day we finished it and we were going back up to do it again. And this woman stopped me and she said, "Oh, is this the Penguin Parade?" the actual, the proper Penguin Parade, because the real Penguin Parade wasn't on at the time.
You said, yes, method acting, yes.
Well, no, not exactly. The support that was with me at the time, she took us in, she went, "I'm really sorry, but it's a show." And she went, "Oh, okay."
Good. Well, where are the penguins? Yeah. Did you ever see the wee penguin that used to come over and join in? He was lovely.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Oh.
And I think the fact that, it was just this stray penguin, I think because, I don't know, it must have been the costumes. And he must have seen us and thought, "Oh, it's the Penguin Parade, I'll just waddle along." And he must have realised at some point, I mean, I don't know animal instinct or anything like that, but he must have realised at some point, "Oh, it's not," but I would just stand here anyway and just kind of waddle along with it. And that was just lovely.
It's good. Look at those big penguins. Where are those big penguins from?
Exactly.
No, I loved it.
No. Where do you see Gridiron 5 years from now?
Well, hopefully surviving. It dawned on me, and Michael Fraser will probably have had the same cold, waking dream that we're probably about another year. It's only a year before we'll need to make our next RFO application. So that's a delight for all of us. So we know what we'll be doing up till March 2021, please God. And then we are gently starting to think about the next 3 years beyond that, which would take us up to probably our 5-year point. The main thing is that we would hope that we stay relevant, that we hope that there are still excellent people and excellent companies that want to work with us. We hope we're continuing to tell the stories and investigate the issues that people are interested in talking about. We hope to God that we're all happy enough in a post-Brexit world, and that we can still make theatre, and that there's still some joy for us to have. I think it does weigh on my mind quite a lot, the fact that a lot of other companies are making site work now, and a lot of those companies are run by people that are much younger and maybe more technically savvy than us, old farts getting on a bit. So I would like us to be working with a whole next generation of artists and performers and theatre practitioners that are keeping us relevant and keeping the work exciting. Well, fingers crossed, because it really is a fantastic company, even if I say so myself. Having worked with that company, just the work ethic is brilliant. And the thing about Gridiron in particular is it just feels like one big collaborative effort. Because, again, going back to the zoo, the technical crew used to join in with the Penguin Parade, which was just lovely. So there was no sense of you guys are the actors and we're the technical guys. It was, everybody was together in it, and I think that's just lovely. And that, for me, is ensemble. It includes everybody, and that was just lovely. I thought. I think that's really lovely to hear, because that's certainly what we strive for. And when we work with a fabulous company like Lung Ha, we have the best ensemble in the world. So what we all really want to do is to be able to enjoy that, because every single one of us shares the aim, and that comes from all the support workers, front of house people. And what's really lovely then is whenever people working in the building or the site or the zoo start to take a bit of ownership and start to be proud of what we're all doing as well. That can be tricky, because a lot of them are just overworked and working hard, but it's collaboration is absolutely key, because that's when we have fun. And at the very end of the day, with everything else that we have to go through when we're doing our shows, we should be having fun.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. That's what makes it worth it for me anyway. I don't know if yourself.
Because even if it's a difficult subject matter, or if it's a tragedy, or if it's a very heavy show,
Yes.
there's a lot of fun to be had
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any kind of international spaces, i.e. Broadway or the West End or places like that you really would like Gridiron to produce work in?
Oh, do you know, we almost got to do a show in one of the parks in New York.
Oh.
So we made a show in 2007 called Once Upon a Dragon.
Yep.
Full-on fairy tale. It was part of the Children's Festival in a place called Camel Estate,
Yep.
which is on the way out to the Forth Road Bridge.
Yep.
It was based on lots of different Grimm's fairy tales, but not trying to sugarcoat them or anything. The show was for 5 to 7-year-olds,
Yeah.
and it ended with a dragon being killed in a forest and all sorts of. Becky Minto designed it, who I know works with Lungha as well, and oh my God, we realised all our sort of fairy tale dreams. There was apples and trees, there was footprints on the dragon, footprints, all sorts of stuff. And there's a woman who runs a theatre building in Broadway. It's called the New Victory, and it's Broadway's only. It's just off Times Square, New York. It's Broadway's only theatre specifically for children and young people. And she'd been a fan of our work and had been waiting for us to do something for children. So we made this show. She saw it. She brought us over to New York to see if we could take it across. Ben and I spent a glorious day being driven round parks and Bronx and Queens and we were in Central Park. We were off-road in Central Park to see if we could find somewhere to do this show. I'll never forget the guy from New York City Parks Department who drove us around was called Freedom Bradley, and he was gorgeous. So that helped with the full experience. But then Ben and I were sitting later on in a pub, not surprisingly, and we thought about the budget, and we thought about all the extra security that we would need, because here in Edinburgh we were able to just put up our rig, rig our lights and equipment into the trees. We had one security guard that sat in a porta cabin overnight. Nobody touched anything, all fine. This isn't going to happen in New York City. So it quickly dawned on us and the people running the New Victory Theatre that we were probably talking about at the very least $500,000 to make this show happen.
Yeah.
However, as we were realising that in a pub in New York, I think it was East Village, I can't remember, I was like, Ben, we need to think of a site-specific show that we can take that could travel to places. And he went, well, I have been thinking about an idea for a show called Barflies that we could make in the Barony bar. And there are bars everywhere, and there are old-fashioned bars everywhere. And then, so that was 2 years later, we made Barflies happen at the Fringe, and then we toured it again a couple of years later, and it was really successful. So out of disappointment, good things can come, but I'd still love to have done a show in a park in New York.
Do you have any favourite spaces that Gridiron has worked in?
Yeah, well, this was my local at the time, so this was quite a favourite. I like the spaces that give us a lot of challenge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you wouldn't normally think with all that, how much effort and work that went into making Dr. Stirlingshire's Discovery happen in the zoo. You would have thought that maybe we didn't want to go to the zoo at all again for like years afterwards, because it was very hilly.
Yes.
But Deborah and I were back about 2 weeks later, and we finally did the whole zoo experience, because we really enjoyed it. But we hadn't seen half the animals because we were so, when we were there, we were busy working. I mean, it was extraordinary doing the show in the airport. I think possibly though a winner is we made a show in 2008 in Stavanger in the south of Norway, when it was European Capital of Culture. And the show was called Tryst, and it was about life with the sea. So it's Norway. Yes. It was a little island that was home to a community of boat builders that were making traditional wooden hulled boats. The island was just the size of the sheds that the boat builders worked in, but we had to row to get to work in the morning. And the audience came we collected the audience from Stavanger Harbour in a boat. So we had our own boat for a couple of weeks. So that was just gorgeous. And the other thing about the Norwegians are a fabulous fabulous race of people. They're really hospitable and they're really funny. And the whole country is just beautifully clean.
Yes.
So it kind of changed my life. As soon as we got home, I had everything out in my bedroom. The whole house was clean because I am going to be Scandinavian.
Yeah.
So that was a big favourite, learning to row.
Yeah. And to finish, can you describe the work that Gridiron does in 3 words?
Right. Expensive? No. I'll go for I'll go for positive words. Inventive?
Yes.
Exciting? Hopefully. And I'd like to say accessible, stroke entertaining.
Yes.
That's 4 words.
Oh, it's fine, don't worry. Well, okay, that's the end of the interview. Thank you very much,
Thank
Judith
you.
Doherty.
Thank you, Gavin Yule.